Thanks for tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about spraying in soybeans later on in the season. Is it still worth it? We'll discuss that.
Well, we do have things to talk about with this year's crop, but I'm already making plans for next year. So today we're going to discuss what should your fertilizer plans be in regards to 2014.
Well, if you've got our Weed of the Week, you can't think about next year. You've got to get it under control right now, and we'll show you how today. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about pre-harvest intervals.
I thought we were going to talk about thunder and lightning going on behind us and why this rain is not hitting our field. I don't know, Brian. You know, there's a lot of things going on late in the season, and a late rain would be wonderful. But if there's bugs or weeds or diseases that come into your field, you've got to start thinking about, well, how long is it until harvest? And number one, is it even worth spraying, which we'll talk about later in the show? But number two, can you even spray those products
Well,
late?
yeah, because you want to talk about the farmer's viewpoint. Our Farm Basics time is always about the non-farmer. So if you're a non-farmer, you're probably wondering about farmers spraying pesticides late in the season, right before harvest, and hey, doesn't some of that stuff end up in my food? Well, in order to get a pre-harvest interval on a chemical label, a major chemical manufacturer will go to the EPA and they'll also go to the FDA and they'll talk about these things, and they will run literally, in some cases, millions of dollars worth of tests. So they will raise a crop, spray the product on at certain timings, and then they're going to, at the end of the season, in conjunction with EPA and FDA, test to see if there's still pesticide residues left in that particular crop.
I think about a crop like soybeans, for example, and I'm not eating the soybeans right out of my field. They're going to get processed afterwards. Chances are a lot of those soybeans are going to run through an animal's diet, like hog feed, for example. And so there's another step before that actually ends up getting to us. But there are some crops, like right out of your vegetable garden, for example, that you may say, well, I've got tomatoes out here, and is it safe to spray something because I'm going to harvest those tomatoes in 3 days or 7 days? And that's why, as Brian was saying, the chemical companies will do a lot of research in conjunction with the government to see, is it safe? Can I spray just a few days before harvest? In a crop like soybeans, those companies may not care at all. They may say, you know what, I don't really care if we spray within a month of harvest, so why do the testing to prove it's safe within 3 days or 7 days? It could be safe on soybeans right up until harvest, but in most cases, if they're within 21 days or 30 days and they can prove safety there, that's about as far as most chemical companies will go.
So what Darren is getting at here is there are going to be different pre-harvest intervals for different crops and obviously for different pesticides. So you might look on the label of one particular pesticide and find that every crop has a different pre-harvest interval. It might be 3 days for this crop, 7 days for that crop, 28 days for that crop, and you might look at that especially as a non-farmer and say, oh, something must be wrong here. Well, it comes back to what Darren's talking about. It's just the fact that the company didn't want to invest those extra millions of dollars to label something that isn't even necessary. I guess we would stress to you, look at the label, see what the pre-harvest interval says, and if you've got a short pre-harvest interval like 3 days on a particular crop, you know that pesticide doesn't stick around very long in that crop.
Well, the other thing is, from a farmer's perspective, you've got to read those labels. And if you've got something going on, like let's just say you have grasshoppers that are out chewing off your pods in your soybean field and you're ready to harvest in a week. Well, if you look at the pre-harvest interval and you see that it's 28 days on a certain insecticide, don't spray. You can't be doing those things. It's not worth it. And the other side of that, from the chemical company's perspective, is they're looking at what pests can come up late in the season. They're trying to find ways to get their products labeled to control those because they want to sell product. They want to make money, but they're not going to do it where it's not safe. So you have to read the label and follow those guidelines.
Well, one of the things you may look at the pre-harvest interval for is control of our Weed of the Week. Can you spray a herbicide close to harvest, or do you have to wait a long time before harvest? We'll talk about that coming up later in the show.
If you want to take your farm to the next level, you have to go where the in-field research is being done. Hi, I'm Darren Hefty with Ag PhD TV. One of the field tours that Brian and I have enjoyed the most each summer is the North Central Research Station tour in Michigan. There are over 500 acres of replicated trials in corn, soybeans, wheat, and numerous other crops. You'll learn more about crop fertility in a few hours than most farmers will in a decade. Visit agriliquid.com for all the details, and maybe we'll see you there.
Upgrade your trailer to electric with the Rolltech electric system from AgriCover. Strong, flexible pivot arms and motor mount rotate and telescope, allowing the roll tube to rise and flex over heaped loads. The positive automatic lock is impossible to back off to control the flow of grain. This integrated system uses one wireless remote to operate up to 10 tarps and hoppers, keeping your driver out of the dust, rain, and harm's way. See the Rolltech system in action at an AgriCover dealer near you.
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave pea. Most of your applied pea gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more pea available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing pea availability can lead to increased pea uptake in the plant. That's more pea, and more pea. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your pea with Avail.
At Titan Machinery and Case IH, we offer better solutions for all your production needs. It's more than our job, it's who we are. We are parts. We are service. We are training. And most importantly, we are here for you. In any season, for every reason, we've got you covered. Case IH and Titan Machinery, better solutions.
What's new for 2013? Challenge 2050. Challenge 2050 is a two-component system consisting of a nutrient and a biological additive. This groundbreaking fertilizer contains mycorrhizal fungi, which provide an extended transport system that allows water and nutrients to be delivered directly into the root. Challenge 2050 can increase yield and efficiency of your standard fertilizer program. Challenge 2050 is the future of fertilizer. Call TJ Technologies or your fertilizer dealer and get Challenge 2050 today.
Well, later on in the season, we always have questions about, is it too late to make it worth it to spray? Can I still spray for bugs out there, or am I just wasting my time?
Well, not just bugs, but weeds, diseases. How about plant growth regulators? I mean, there are all these things late in the season. So for Darren and me, we do get a lot of calls at this time of the year questioning whether something is worth it or is it not. So we'll talk through kind of our thought process on that whole thing.
So as we've got this rain cloud passing overhead, I'm just thinking about if our beans could catch one more rain, there's still more time. They could put on more flowers, more pods, and we could have more yield.
Yeah, one more rain, several more rains, because August a lot of times is when beans are made. We need rain late in the season, and then we can have great yield a lot of times, even if earlier in the year it's been bad. If we've had drought like we did in 2012, didn't matter. We caught some rains in August, we still had 60 bushel soybeans.
So what you're saying is we still have a chance, and there's still a time where we could have a disease, a bug, a weed, whatever, and it could take away from our yield potential. And that's what we're talking about. If our beans still haven't started to senesce, the leaves haven't started to turn yellow, there's still a chance and there's still hope that we could put on more flowers and more pods. And as long as that's the case, I'm concerned about what we've got out here. Now, if you've got a year where your beans are huge and they're all filled in and you say, man, all I've got is a ground rig, I don't want to go through and tear up a whole bunch of my beans trying to spray, that may be a consideration. But if you can hire an airplane, then it really isn't a consideration. You could still treat that field no matter how late it gets to be.
You could, but then that changes the economic threshold. So if I can treat myself and I figure, well, hey, I'm already out there spraying for bugs, now I want to use a fungicide, for example, I have zero cost for application because I was out there already.
Yeah, but fungicide, Brian, it's so late in the year for fungicide.
No,
We've got to get out there ahead of this disease. That's the problem. You know, we look at the ideal timing for fungicide, we're talking about right at full bloom or maybe first pod.
Not necessarily.
Not R4, R5 when we get into August.
Not
it's getting pretty late.
Okay, let's say you have white mold or you're concerned about white mold. You're just talking about those big beans. Let's say I treated at R2 with a fungicide, a full rate. That's going to give me hopefully a couple weeks worth of residual. And then I come back maybe at R4. So maybe right at this time is when I'm going to go spray. So my
good luck with that program.
Well, what do you mean good luck? That's exactly
tough.
what you want to do, is do 2 shots if you've got a bad disease like white mold that you're real concerned about. So I definitely do not think it's too late to spray fungicide in some cases.
I would do 2 shots on white mold, but the problem is those 2 shots had to happen a lot earlier. With disease control, what I'm talking about is you have to be out there before you have a disease. You can't see all these things like, oh no, I've got brown stem rot. I can see it all over my field. You're too late. you've already lost your yield. Now you may go out there and stop it from expanding, but I don't know that you're really going to save all that much yield at this point.
But I'm going to disagree with that 100%, because at this point, I think if we get a couple late rains, we can add 15 bushels onto the beans just like that. So if you have disease setting in, you're going to lose that 15 bushels. So I just think you need to take a look at what are my conditions? Do I already have a bunch of disease? When did I spray fungicide? That kind of thing. But anyway, coming back to this aerial application, that's where we started with the whole thing. I may look at, okay, I've got $8 for an application there. I can treat for $3 myself if, let's say, the only thing I am going out to spray for is bugs. Okay, so the difference is I got $5 gap there. Well, that changes my economic threshold just a little bit, so I have to find a few more bugs out there if I'm going to treat with a plane as opposed to treating myself.
When you talk about all this extra yield potential, I think the big yield potential comes if we can stop the bugs. That's where I see a lot of problems late in the season. We get some pod clipping with bean leaf beetles. We get grasshoppers moving in and defoliating. We got all kinds of issues that can pop up late, and it's so inexpensive to treat for bugs. Even if you have to hire that aerial application, it costs you $8 for the plane, you're only going to spend $2 or $3 for insecticide. So it's still less than the cost of 1 bushel to get those acres treated. So if you need to spray for bugs, there is no question in my mind that's going to pay for you, even late in the season. Right now, you've got everything hanging out there. You got all those pods in your plants. You can't afford to have a bug chewing on it. It's a whole different deal than early in the season if, a bug's going to chew on a leaf here or there. Who cares? This time of year, though, you've got your flowers out there and you've got all your pods. You can't afford insect feeding at all.
The other thing is when you have bugs feeding on your crop, you have more disease. And sometimes that just means the beans are going to shrivel up a little bit. They're going to be discolored. They're going to look bad. It doesn't necessarily hurt yield a tremendous amount, but especially if you are a seed grower, for example, you want those beans looking nice at the end of the year.
Well, weeds are the other thing, Brian. We've got a lot of Roundup-resistant weeds that have popped through a number of treatments this year because, let's face it, a lot of the products that we're going out there with are just contact killers. So yeah, we can burn off that first flush or that second flush, but you know what? We've got a field right here where we aren't completely closed. We got the beans planted late, the canopy didn't completely fill in, and now we've got a few more weeds poking through. And spraying them late is a big question guys have. I've already sprayed twice. Do I really need to spray a third time?
Well, that's really debatable because what are you going to spray with this late in the season? Roundup, you're off-label at this point.
And plus, it's not going to kill a lot of those weeds.
Right. Just about every product you're off-label. So what are you going to do? So what some farmers will do is they're going to go in real late in the season with a pre-harvest burn down. You might be able to get by with that. You got to look at the label. There are some products like Roundup, for example, that might be 3-day or 7-day pre-harvest interval. So just take a look at the label. But, you know, right now, here in the middle of August, am I really going to spray these beans? I don't think so. What I'm probably going to do is send Darren out to pull some of those weeds.
Oh, there we go. That sounds like a lot of fun. But honestly, that is what's happening. A lot of guys are going out and hand weeding, whether it's with a full crew of people with, you know, either pulling the weeds or with hose, whatever it may be. If you've got a problem weed, you've got to think about how many seeds are going to be produced. Like on water hemp or palm or pigweed, for example, you could have 1 million seeds per plant. And if you've got 1 million seeds in a small area or several million in a small area, you're going to be fighting that weed for at least 5 to 7 years, if not more. So you've got to get those weeds under control if they're bad. Now, the other thing is, if you just see one weed here or there, you may say, well, that's no big deal. There's just one weed here or there. I look at it the other way. It's no big deal. Go pull them. Get them out of your field. Don't let them go to seed. Why would you do that? If you just leave one weed scattered here and there, now you're going to have one patch scattered here and there for the next few years. It's not worth it. You got to get out there and get those weeds under control.
Well, once again, when it comes to late season spraying in soybeans, there are a few things that you can debate whether or not you're going to spray fungicide this late. Insecticide's probably worth it. Spraying weeds this late, probably not worth it, but you just need to work with a good agronomist and get some recommendations for your farm. But all I can tell you is on our farm, I'm still expecting top yields, and August is a very important month.
Well, especially if we get some rain like this, and especially if we can keep our weed of the week out of our fields. Can you identify this week's weed?
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Honey Wagon? Can the sweet talk. Out here we treat manure, and when we talk treats, we don't mean cupcakes. Treating manure with More Than Manure Nutrient Manager can reduce solids in your pit or lagoon and ammonia levels in confinement buildings. PU, try N and P. MTM is the first and only nutrient manager proven to reduce nitrogen loss and phosphorus lockup. That's fertilizer loaded with yield potential. Looking for proof? Check the bin. Isn't that sweet? Results you can't ignore, a pit you finally can.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's a head above the rest.
You expect a lot from this seed, and as it grows through each stage of development, Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers is there, feeding your crop exactly what it needs when it needs it. So no matter how you fertilize, no matter when, AgroLiquid efficiently brings all the nutrients your crop needs for a great harvest. From 1 kernel in the ground to 600 on the ear. For better yields and better quality, Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers.
What's your fertilizer plan for 2014? It's at this time of the year, every year, when we go through our fertility plan for the coming season. And I'm not saying that we make all our final plans, but at least we're getting everything roughly figured out and starting to buy our materials that we need for 2014.
See, I think people have figured you out by now, Brian. You're already working on 2015's program. You got 2016's in the back of your mind. I mean, this guy just loves to plan. And it is fun farming, and I realize, man, we've already made most of the decisions for this year. So, what are we going to do? Are we going to go to South America and start another crop, or are we going to start thinking about our crop here for next year? Well, we're already looking at what is our profitability going to be, and it's not just from a grain marketing standpoint, but it's also from buying the inputs. If we can buy the same inputs that we know we're going to use for less money, why would you not do it? So that's what we're talking about today, getting a good deal on our fertility program, but also just thinking about what mistakes we made this year, what changes we want to make going into next year so we can do even better.
Now, when Darren's giving me a hard time for 2015 and 2016, no, I haven't put those together. I'm not a, no, seriously.
He's working on that next week.
No, I'm not a believer in doing that because I don't know what next year is going to bring. This year, the crop's already mostly made. I have a real good idea how much fertilizer we used, where our problems were, what we need to do going into next season, and certainly we're going to tweak that plan after we do soil tests this fall and when we get the last of our plant tissue analysis test results in from this year. But I can already see how the plant tissue did this year. I can already see kind of how the crop was doing. I already see where our weaknesses were, and I guess I'll just bring up one of the biggest things. All these seed companies are pushing you to plant higher corn populations, and we're doing that on our own farm. We're seeing good results from planting higher corn populations, but the problem is when you plant higher corn populations, you're going to force the corn to grow taller, and you've got a lot more plants out there using the same fertilizer you probably had last year, the same fertilizer plan you probably had last year. That's not a good thing. What happens a lot of times is we find our stalks to be too small to support big ears, and we have a lot more lodging problems in higher plant populations. So what do you need to do fertility-wise? You need to address potassium and maybe even some micronutrients.
Well, I think the cool thing about it, Brian, is as we push populations, it really just exposes our weaknesses. And maybe it is those things you talked about. Maybe it's something else. We don't know. But, we're just going to go into the year with the best program we've got, trying to feed that higher population and hopefully continue to push yields. If we're getting 200 bushel corn now, we're not planning for 200 bushel corn next year. We're planning for 210 or we're planning for 220. We're going to keep pushing things a little bit, and you've always got to be just a little bit ahead. So if you're just putting on barely enough fertilizer for right where you're at now, you aren't going to be able to grow. You have hit a plateau and you're going to stay there. you've got to try and push that a little bit more. Now, we're also pushing with population, as Brian said, but you got to keep that fertility up to speed too.
And I'm not just going for 210 or 220 on some of this ground, I'm going for 300 long term. Now, I might not put enough nitrogen out for 300 because that's a short-term nutrient, but P and K, I can build my ground up, so eventually in, let's say, 3 years, I can get to 300 bushel corn. That's what I'm targeting. Okay, talking about your fertilizer program, here's our 3-step plan of action for you. Number 1, start planning right now for 2014 based on all the data that you have, past soil tests, tissue samples, field scouting, and knowing that chances are you're going to plant higher corn populations, for example. Any of that data, pull it together, just start going through field by field and say, well, I think I'm going to do this, I think I'm going to use these nutrients. Number 2, we want you to start looking at buying some fertility now. Typically, you're going to find the best prices of the season in August and September. It doesn't always work out that way, but I would say 8 years out of 10, that's usually when we find the seasonal lows. Number 3, tweak the plan after harvest this fall based on harvest data and soil test data. So once you've done those 3 things, you should have a pretty good plan going forward to next year.
That's a nice plan, Brian, but you left out one thing.
What's that?
Controlling our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough one coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Your farm tells a story, one that continues with the decisions you make. Introducing the Enlist Weed Control System, an advanced herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate for exceptional control of tough weeds. The next chapter begins.
Our weed of the week is not milkweed, it's hemp dogbane.
Yep, this is one we confused a lot when we were kids. Hemp dogbane's just a little bit different plant, but it is a perennial, it is tough to control, and it does kind of have a little bit of milk in that stem.
Well, the thing about hemp dogbane, the leaves are a lot smaller than common milkweed. They're pointed, and when you look at those leaves, they are so waxy and thick that when you're spraying any kind of pesticide on them, it just seems to run off, run down the stem, and end up on the soil. So it's really tough to stick something on there. You've really got to focus on what you're going to use for surfactants to try to hold that product on, and then you've got to have concentrated droplets because chances are you won't stick very many droplets on hemp dogbane.
So by concentrated droplets, what we mean is use less water. Don't put on 20 or 30 gallons of water when you're trying to control hemp dogbane. It's probably not going to work. You want as little water as possible, have a concentrated droplet.
Here's the other thing with hemp dogbane that's really tough. It's a perennial, it does have rhizomes, so you've got all this extensive system underground, yet we can't really use pre-emerge herbicides and get a big impact on it. You know, a lot of the pre's, you can ding it up a little bit maybe at best, but it's not going to completely take it out. You're going to end up having to spray post, and then when we're talking about post-emerge sprays, there are hardly any that are very effective on it.
Yep, but the good news is typically this hemp dogbane's going to get going early in the season, or in other words, it's going already from last year or 3 years ago even. It started early. So you can spray this in a burn down situation before you plant. Here's the key. Don't do tillage over that hemp dogbane patch. If you're doing tillage across the whole rest of the field, fine. But lift that tillage implement up, go across that dogbane patch, and then spray a nice strong shot of Roundup, the highest possible labeled rate, right before you plant.
We used to have just a little bit of hemp dogbane on our farm, but really over the years with some Roundup Ready crops, we've completely wiped the weed out. The only place that we normally see it now is maybe in the ditches or in a grassy area along some trees or a river or something like that.
But you say that, but the highest rate in crop isn't great on dogbane. So if you're talking 32 or 44 ounces of Roundup Power Max or Weather Max, that's real borderline on the perennial dogbane. If it's first year and it just came up from seed, then you can probably get it with that rate though.
Well, really your best bet to knock hemp dogbane back is a very strong rate of Roundup. If you can't do that, perhaps you could do some 2,4-D or dicamba and just try to burn it back a little bit and hold it down. You won't do a good job on the root system with those. You really need the Roundup for that.
That's all our time for this week's Weed, Hemp Dogbane, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
What are farmers doing to feed the planet? They're using Quadtrac technology, soil management, and planting systems from Case IH to foster a better growing environment that maximizes yield potential. Visit caseih.com to be ready.
Your wheat harvest went well, but the residue left in your field wasn't spread perfectly. We'll talk about how to fix that and the implications if you don't during today's Iron Talk. Everyone's always excited to get the wheat crop off instantly as soon as it's ready. We fall into that category as well. However, if you don't get your residue spread evenly, you're setting yourself up for problems with your next crop. Even if the residue is just a little thicker in spots, it leads to the ground not warming up as fast and the emergence of your crop being slowed or even stopped. Act now to move that residue around and eliminate problems going forward. Some tillage, hopefully just light tillage, will be required. A heavy harrow has become a popular choice in the Dakotas, but anything light, like a field finisher, would be a good option. The trick is to do as little soil disturbance as possible, since these fields will be sitting for a while with no crop on them. Personally, I'd like to get a cover crop out there immediately to protect your soils from erosion too. No matter what crop you're harvesting, make sure the residue spreads evenly, otherwise you're going to need some light tillage to clean it up. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now, back to the show.
There are more mouths to feed than ever before. What are farmers doing to meet the challenge? They're using agronomically designed equipment from Case IH. Our Quadtrac technology, soil management, and planting systems are designed to foster a better growing environment that helps farmers maximize yield potential. And our deep understanding of agriculture is preparing them for the challenges ahead. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
Go to caseih.com to learn more.
Micronutrients are not optional for plants, they are essential. TJ Micromix is a profit-proven management tool that ensures the availability of essential secondary and micronutrients. Formulated as a dry granule or liquid, TJ Micromix is plant available, easy to mix and apply. The synergistic fertilizer mix delivers consistent yield response on a variety of crops by complementing an NPK fertilizer program. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your fertilizer dealer and get your TJ Micromix today.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's a head above the rest.
Upgrade your trailer to electric with the Rolltech electric system from AgriCover. Strong, flexible pivot arms and motor mount rotate and telescope, allowing the roll tube to rise and flex over heaped loads. The positive automatic lock is impossible to back off to control the flow of grain. This integrated system uses one wireless remote to operate up to 10 tarps and hoppers, keeping your driver out of the dust, rain, and harm's way. See the Rolltech system in action at an AgriCover dealer near you.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to join us again next time for another Weed of the Week, Iron Talk, Farm Basics, and much more. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
American ethanol is made primarily from corn. Did you realize that the type of corn used for ethanol and livestock feed is much different than the sweet corn on your dinner table? For more information, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.